Hopefully he signs back in. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Hello. Meeting somebody in CNCF forgot to pay the bill, Alan.
My apologies. Was that for everybody or did I just get cut
Oh,
off?
no, that was all of us.
Oh, okay, okay.
Uh, we're back to the 40-minute
I
leave and
see.
rejoin.
Okay, okay. I did see that and I was like, is that gonna kick us out? But yes, it did.
So right now, in terms of like the build flow, we basically use like string substitution.
Okay.
But testing, we do have something very specific with Gator. So I'm gonna link to a sweet YAML. I just chose an arbitrary one. Hopefully it's a good example. I'm gonna post it in the meeting chat here.
Okay.
And so what this is basically, you could knit, is it a unit test or is it an end-to-end test? But it is a way for Gator to basically load a constraint template and a series of constraints and sets of referential data and just a bunch of example inputs and running assertions on, is this policy violated? Is it not violated? Um, and why I highlight this is because I mentioned we're going to be migrating some templates from Rego to Cell. And this is part of how we're going to be able to validate both the Rego implementation and the Cell implementation and try to ensure that they both have the same behaviors.
Got it.
Uh,
I can see
because
that.
this is purely working with example Kubernetes resources and not the code itself, it doesn't matter if your underlying implementation changes. It's still going to run the same kinds of checks.
Got it. Yeah, that's really good validation. Is Gator using its own OPA engine, like versioning, or do you provide the version of OPA that you want to run the Gator suite against?
It's in lockstep with Gatekeeper, so
I see.
it's all in the same GitHub repo. But
Got it.
so there's for a given version of Gatekeeper, we're using a specific version of Rego
Got
slash
it.
OPA under the hood.
Cool. Okay.
And
That's
there's a
that's
page in our docs that lists the OPA version corresponding to a gatekeeper version.
got it. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
And
Okay.
then, by
Yeah.
the way, if you're interested in Rego specifically, you can also take a look at how our library does the constraint template generation.
Okay.
So we have the Rego source file and the corresponding unit test file. So we test that in our library, just the source Rego and the unit test, and then we template it out into constraint templates.
Okay.
So the constraint template itself is blank. Basically, just the Rego gets inserted.
Got it. Got it.
So we,
I'll
we
take
we
a look at
don't
that.
have
Yeah.
multiple copies of the Rego. There's only one source of them.
There's only, yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
perfect. I'll
And
take a
you
look.
can take a look at the scripts and library
Yep.
to get some examples of that.
Okay. But I like Max's point on VAP, something I haven't looked at yet. And although I mean yesterday I think I watched a video on one of the KubeCon talks, and I did see that limitation of referential data, which would be
Yeah.
a blocker right now. Do you guys know if that's something in their pipeline that they might support, or just it's not
As
supported today?
far as I'm aware, it's a somewhat hard no. There are kind of approximations you can do with VAP because VAP does allow a parameter resource, but there's nothing that says your parameter resource needs to be an actual like parameter. So some people suggest pointing your parameter resource at another object you want to reference. That does have limitations.
Mm, mm.
You can only have one parameter resource per invocation. So you're not going to be able to look at the set of all ingresses, right? When you do that, you would need to be able to write a policy that can be expressed merely by looking at each other resource one at a time, right? Not all together.
Yeah.
So you probably could write the uniqueness one, I think, because there you're just, oh, if I am not the exact same resource as the parameter resource and I have an identical host name, then that's violating.
Mhm.
But something that requires you to say sum across, like let's say you're doing some kind of like resource limits thing, right, where the sum of all pods in any given namespace can't use more than X amount of RAM or whatever. That you would need the full context in order to effectively write a policy like that.
That makes sense. Okay. No, that's very helpful, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is Gatekeeper's VAP integration supposed to help alleviate, like, why would I go Gatekeeper VAP integration versus straight up, the native resources?
So there's probably, I would say, convenience reasons and functionality reasons.
Yeah.
VAP is hyper focused on the admission use case, but it doesn't provide solutions for like auditing of existing cluster state, for instance, like Gatekeeper's audit functionality. And there's no way to shift it left, right? So and obviously it doesn't have referential like we were talking about, because VAP cell just can't express that except for certain like edge cases that we're talking about just now. So one thing is that if you need any kind of policy that VAP cannot express, you need to be using Gatekeeper anyway. So there's a question of, do you want a single pane of glass manage
Yep.
both sets of policies, right? In which case, using Gatekeeper to intermediate VAP provides that, right?
That's great. Yeah.
In another potential use case is, if you do want to take a VAP policy and you want to use VAP for webhook enforcement, because, or instead of webhook enforcement, I should say, because of this reliability concern, latency concern, what have you, but you still want audit and you still want shift left. Well, I want to like caveat this slightly, because not all of VAP can exist outside of the webhook context, right? Some things just don't make sense. Like the information isn't there. Like you can imagine old object, right? That's not going to exist in an audit context. Something like the authorizer that VAP has embedded, that requires being inside the API server to call the authorizer. And the authorizer just like pretends to make a request and says, would RBAC have allowed this, is roughly my understanding of it. That Gatekeeper can't emulate because it doesn't have access to those like primitives, those code pathways. But if you have a VAP policy that doesn't require some of these non-portable features, you can write your policy using this K8s native validation stuff that we kind of have locked down behind a flag right now. And you can use VAP generation to have VAP enforce at the webhook level, right? So or the admission level, I should say. So you're getting the benefits of not using the webhook or not relying on the webhook, but you also get audit, and you can also run Gator, and
Okay.
it should still work.
Okay, yeah. Those are really great use cases to be aware of. Thank you.
Yeah.
More homework to dive into, but yeah, I'm interested in diving into these new capabilities.
Yeah. And VAP is new, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I personally would kind of be surprised if there weren't some mentioning of it in compliance standards at some point. Maybe, certain larger projects that have some security concerns around them, maybe networking focused stuff, if they didn't start providing some VAP primitives alongside their project, just to help with locking down how their extensions, like their CRDs or whatever, can be configured. And I think the reason why that becomes more likely with something like VAP is because it's built into Kubernetes, right? Like right now, if you're just using third-party policy engines, one, it's third-party, right? So whatever other project is sort of betting on whatever choice they're making, whether it's Gatekeeper, whether it's Caverno, that it will suit their customers' needs, that it'll suit their needs, that they'll be able to keep up with whatever project as it evolves over time. Versus something that's centralized, like validating admission policy. That is defined by Kubernetes itself. So there's very much stronger, I think, backwards compatibility guarantees, and a stronger expectation of availability as well, right? Like if you have Kubernetes, you can at least enable VAP if your cloud provider allows it. Whether that kind of stuff matters to you, I mean, it's speculative, obviously, and also it doesn't cover things like audit or shift left. So for me, personally, from a gatekeeper point of view, my thought is, how do I take this anticipated future, or how do we take this anticipated future, really, and how do we play nicely with it, right? Like it would be nice if we could take these primitives that I expect we'll start to see, of like, hey, we have the Istio VAP package or whatever, and how do we make it very easy to put those into constraint templates so you can like validate your Istio shift left, but also use it as the Istio authors intended.
Right. Perfect.
Sorry if that was like a bunch of boring, irrelevant soapbox thing.
It's good to get some of that insight. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. Did Rita drop out?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, I don't think she got back after we dropped.
How long is your LLM video?
Let's do it next week. There's no rush. It's like 4 minutes now. And it's also in the PR if anybody wants to look at it.
Gotcha. As Alan, for context, last week, Surtesh, what's the right way to put it? I don't think I dared you.
No. I was already thinking about it, and then you brought like, hey, what if like the LLM made decisions instead of like Rego or Sal or whatever?
Ooh.
And then I already had existing work for it. So I made so similar to like Rego or Cell, I made an engine for an LLM to make decisions based on the policies.
Very cool. Where's this PR or demo that I can?
It's in the Gatekeeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's two PRs, one in the frameworks and Gatekeeper, but the Gatekeeper one is the end-to-end.
Does it have a link to the demo in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
PR?
it's in the PR description. I'll paste it in the chat. I'll do a demo next week.
It's really something. He just writes what was it like, do not allow
Yeah, like privileged pod or something like that, and that's all you need.
And you were saying you tried it with both GPT-4 and with what, Mixtral?
Yeah, I tried with Mixtral running locally. It was able to output JSON, which I was pretty amazed by that actually. But the decisions were not as good as the OpenAI ones.
Now, was OpenAI, as far as you could tell, was it batting 1,000? Like, did it ever give an inaccurate?
I've never had a false positive from OpenAI.
I would be more concerned about false negatives personally.
Sorry, what? Like never had a bad decision, I should say.
Oh, okay. So everything that should have been rejected was okay.
Or I mean, sometimes like it over does it. Say like it will also block for init containers. I mean, which is fine. And yeah, I think with Mixtral with the same prompt, it was not a good decisions. I think you might be able to optimize it with like better prompts. I mean, my prompts were like pretty like basic. Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah. I'm gonna definitely be back next week then for this demo.
Yeah, yeah, you can see it to the demo. I pasted the thing, and then but
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
I
also
mean, in
talk next
addition,
week. Yeah.
yeah. Just definitely through your walkthrough. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm wondering. It has to be useful. It's just a question of like, where is it responsibly useful? You know? Oh, oh man. Sorry, I'm still. Surtesh showed me a bit of it last week, and I'm still like thinking about that. Like,
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, yeah. And we were also thinking about having Gator generate some of these policies. So like this one is different. This one is creating the cell or rego, some sort of like Gator generates sort of thing. I don't know if that can be done with cell so much because there's like no knowledge source for cell because it's like too new. So I'm still thinking about that. But if anybody has any thoughts about it, I think that would be great.
you know what might be interesting is match conditions.
How so?
Like it. Oh, okay. So, or maybe specification. Like, so I don't think you could get this 100% accurate all the time, but maybe you can like at least get people started. If you had something like pod security standards, like a set of constraints that aligned with each of the buckets or whatever, and you said you had some sort of like chat interface where you said, hey, here's roughly what my infrastructure looks like. Can you make sure that this set of functionality is locked down as possible with the highest pod security standard? This one can be open. Everything else should be like medium. And also there's this like one thing that always needs to be exempt. And can you just like generate the constraints that map to those requirements? And so basically what that might do is fill out the parameters, right? But also fill out the match conditions, right? Like figure out which namespaces are in scope for which specific policies and in which specific subsetting. like if you wanted to do hybrid even between the two. And the reason why I think that might be possible is that constraints provide a well-documented interface between policy and code surface, right? So you can kind of point people at the doc string for the constraint template, as well as the template's parameters, or you can point LLMs at it, sorry. And it could use that to kind of associate, okay, these particular constraints would have this kind of effect, and make associations that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Think so. Like basically, you give the cluster, and then it decides on like what are the best practices, sort of.
Yeah, and it would allow you to, like, rather than going through policies individually,
Yeah.
right? It could provide you some kind of like starting point of here's a blend of all of these knobs that I think will work for you. Now you like correct my work, and then you can apply it if you like it.
Yeah. And are you thinking about like just the LLM decision making, or were you thinking about like generating policies, like regos / or cell?
I was thinking it would just create constraints. The
Just
constraint
create
templates would be already
Oh, I
existing.
see. So like it doesn't touch the rego or cell, but it creates constraints based on those factors.
Yeah, and it's creating match conditions too. So
I
it
see.
doesn't
Okay.
need like deep syntactical code awareness. It just needs awareness of our API surface.
Yeah, and then that's definitely can be done. Because we have it documented. Interesting. Yeah. So let's say like you say like, hey, kube system should be excluded for all of them, and then that basically adds kube system as an excluded namespace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know, I have a billing backend that uses
Like a privileged pod, so it's just going to exclude that namespace, for example.
right. But
Yeah.
also maybe I'm thinking people could describe their infrastructure slightly more abstractly. I don't know if this is work that we ourselves would want to do, but I would be surprised if someone wasn't trying to get LLMs to speak KRM a bit more natively. Like you mentioned, something that queries the discovery API and the documentation API.
Yeah, I do that in my other project, kubectl. I'll also drop them.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if they're able to describe their setup a little more generally, right? Like, okay, these particular teams, they're like they have high privileges. We definitely want to protect them against like escalation attacks or whatever. This other team, they're purely working on like greenfield dev work, and they're never touching anything but like prototype data. So there's no like user or customer risk if they get compromised. So we can be a little bit looser. Um, and then it could figure out, okay, given my understanding of your organization, let me infer which policies should apply to which parts of your cluster and how to provide the matching for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to drop. Yeah, let's continue this next week.
Yeah.
It's super cool, man. Cool.
Yeah.
See y'all.
Don't want to distract from the other stuff, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no like harm in adding some experimental stuff, right? You don't have to commit to it. Yeah.
As long as you say it's experimental.
Yeah. It's this giant experimental. Do not use in production.
All right.
So, nice to see everybody. Yeah. And welcome again, Alan. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Bye bye.